All right, welcome to Building Trust for Protein Diversification. I'm Marin van Damme, co-founder of the Protein Project, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you to MEP Borzen for hosting and to the European Food Forum for organizing. For those who are not familiar with the forum, it's an independent, politically led, non-partisan, multi-stakeholder forum, says it all, which aims to promote multi-stakeholder dialogue, exactly like today. Now, let's talk about proteins. The protein conversation has become one of the most polarized ones in Europe. Some people see urgency, health, environmental pressures, and animal welfare, and others hear threats, rural livelihoods, traditions, and a way of life. And both are real. And it's only by acknowledging this that we can move forward. And protein diversification can be our way out of the trenches, not plant versus animal versus novel, but a pragmatic rebalancing to deliver healthier diets, stronger farm economics, and a more resilient Europe. Now, in order to achieve a protein system, the mic, right?
This one is mine.
This one is yours. Gosh, first mistake of the day, and we're 1 minute in. All right. I will not.
But I was happy to lend it to you.
Yeah. It's sharing. Very good. In order to achieve this protein system that works for all, we'll focus on trust and not stealing each other's mics. And the real question is, what does it take for people to choose differently, for farmers to invest, and for policymakers to de-risk the transition? Now, a few rules before we get started. Obviously, it's an open debate, so you're very welcome to ask questions, agree, disagree, raise your hands, or if you're online, just put it in the chat. There will be Q&A sessions after each panel, but then there will also be a final Q&A at the very end where you can still ask your question to any of the speakers if you missed your chance or if a brilliant question came just too late. I know some questions are long, but I'll ask you to limit to 1 minute a question. Questions are not monologues. Quick reminder on that. And then it's important to say that the event will be recorded and put on the forum's website, and then also that the event has a participation of journalists. Now, this is a 2-hour event, and those are all the speakers. So I will be pretty harsh on time to ensure that we can all finish on time. And yeah, now the floor is to you.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to see you all today here to have this extremely important discussion. Since the 70s, from the last century, the main culprit for diseases and shortening lives was cholesterol, fats. Then there was an era of sugar. And today, lack of proteins in our food is something that science says that has an extremely negative effect on our longevity. So that's why I think it's really important to discuss this issue. Protein diversification is one of those topics where emotions, interests, science, and politics all collide. And that is exactly why we need an open, honest debate. We talk a lot about alternative proteins, but many stakeholders rightly point out that protein diversification is better term. This is not about replacing one product with another or telling people what they should eat. It is about broadening choices, strengthening resilience, and recognizing that Europe's food system is already changing. The secret is booming. Plant-based foods, fermentation, insects, and even cultivated meat show an incredible level of innovation. And in my view, that is clearly part of Europe's food future. But innovation alone is not enough. The biggest challenge we face is trust. Consumers are confused. They hear mixed messages about health, sustainability, processing, and price. There is also a clear PR problem. especially for plant-based products, where perception often lags behind reality. We have all seen cases where plant-based options are tastier, cheaper, or nutritionally sound, yet still struggle to convince people. At the same time, farmers and producers need clarity. They need to trust that diversification is economically viable and supported by stable markets, not just political slogans. And finally, we must be very clear. No one should be forced to eat anything. Whether it's insects, plant-based foods, or cultivated meat, consumers will decide. If there is no demand, there will be no market. But what is non-negotiable is transparent, clear labeling, so people always know exactly what they're buying. Today's discussion is not about winners and losers. It's about how Europe builds a diversified protein system that is fair, evidence-based, and trusted. I'm very much looking forward to the exchange of our views. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you brought it all together already. Trust for the consumers, trust on the farmers, and then also the policies and how do we move forward, which is what we'll discuss today. But before we do that, let's set the scene and really understand what are we meaning by protein diversification. And Stacey Piet, you are program manager at Wageningen University, and I couldn't think of anyone better suited to set the scene. Your career, if I can say so, has been protein diversification. After a PhD in chemical engineering, you continued your career in the dairy industry in the Netherlands, Campina. You then moved on to work on alternative proteins and are now leading broader work on food system transformation. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Marianne. Thank you, MEP Borzan, for organizing this event. And thank you to the European Food Forum for the invitation to speak. Please, the next slide already. I've already been introduced. So my slide deck is about finding common ground. And I think it's always useful to start when we're talking about protein diversification by acknowledging that we all come to the table with a different portfolio of motivations to come to this topic. And I think that acknowledging these different motivations, talking through them, and allowing that there is a variety of motivators for everyone in the room is an important place to start building trust with each other and to start building a dialogue toward how can we collaborate and form coalitions. So I've just put up a few. If we start with the first one on my slide, I wrote the word climate. It could also be planet. It's really a stand-in for all of the nature concerns that we have. And if you come to the table as a climate-motivated person, you could have a portfolio of climate-based motivations. If you were, for example, purely on greenhouse gas emissions, you're probably sitting here hoping that moving away from beef will be the main topic that we talk about inside of protein diversification, because when we look at greenhouse gas emissions, cattle production for beef is the highest emission issue. If that is your concern, you might also feel actually optimistic about a transformation away from beef and toward chicken. So you're actually feeling positive about shifts inside of animal protein production. You might, on the other hand, be most concerned about deforestation, in which case you're looking at our dependency on soy and the association of soy with deforestation, especially in South America, and thinking, well, actually, cattle are a pretty good idea because we can feed cattle on local streams, we can put cattle on our grasslands. So even inside of this topic of climate, even if we're both motivated for climate and we're coming to this protein diversification topic, we may have different viewpoints on what is the potential role of a specific source. And again, I think that's okay. The goal is to allow that to coexist, to be able to acknowledge it to each other and to find out, okay, but where are we united? What are we seeing in common? And to be able to move forward under that umbrella. I think an important one, and the reason I put it on my in the center of my slide, food autonomy. This is one that is obviously in the geopolitical context that we find ourselves today becoming more important, and a dialogue that I expect to also weave through our topic on protein diversification today. My colleagues from Marketing and Economic Research have recently come out with a report looking at, okay, if the trade borders of Europe were to fall closed tomorrow, what are our strategic weaknesses? What are our dependencies? And it basically comes down to, on a macronutrient level, to oil seeds and protein crops. That when we are talking about what do we need to cultivate differently, we need more oil seeds and more protein crops if we are to get away from our food dependencies. There's also, of course, a host of other things that don't feel like luxuries in my personal life, but we would consider luxuries: coffee, tropical fruits, etc. Those things would be issues too. But when we talk about just whether we can feed ourselves in terms of macronutrients, proteins is one of the two. There are also people who come to this discussion looking at economic opportunity. And I want to say, again, here, there's a certain tension or a different viewpoint, because for strategic food autonomy, cultivating pulses is a fantastic idea. For growing our economy, going away from producing animal source foods toward cultivating pulses is a harder sell. It's a harder story, which is why we get woven through this conversation around protein diversification, sometimes a heavy focus on higher tech or things that we can patent or produce new technologies for, when we are coming to the table with an economic opportunity in mind. And I will come back to these different sources in my next slide, but in the end, these are going to coexist. So this is not an either or, but for people who are economic motivated, things like cultured meat or precision fermentation, or just fermentation as a broader topic, biotech is very attractive. And we see countries and organizations that are focused on economic opportunity choosing to go in those directions. Now, all of these on the top are things that I think are weaving through policy in a very prominent way. But when we look at what consumers tell us about their motivations for choosing protein diversification in their personal lives, the number one is actually health. Many people were moving toward a more plant-based diet because the idea of improving their health resonates a lot with them. And it is true that moving away from overconsumption of animal source foods towards more plant, when we get more fiber and more plant phytochemicals, is beneficial for us. Now, all of the evidence that we have about a healthy diet is based on whole foods, pulses, whole grains, etc. And as a scientist, I want to say there's just very little information about modern plant-based foods, about how they fit in our diet and how our bodies respond in particular. So doing studies on us consuming them and reading out all the biomarkers we can do is really important and essential. And we are busy with that. We have one study, but I cannot tell you how hard and expensive it is to try and control people's diets for the full 4 months that we need in order to get good readouts on this. Imagine someone wants to control your diet for 4 months, but we are busy with it. We are working on a study and we hope to come with information soon. But I think this is an important one, and the intersectionality of the perception of food processing, this whole discussion around ultra-processed foods. I know some people will respond in a strong way to that word, but sort of the cat's out of the bag. That word is alive with consumers. So we're going to have to build up science and to come with a science-based information packet if we want to win consumers back, win their trust. Animal welfare, I won't spend a lot of time on that, but obviously a driver for the portfolio of consumers who are choosing to diversify their proteins as well. And last but not least, the one I want to talk about is risk management. I think that this is the one that is, to my mind, underattended in the dialogue, especially to policy, whereas the food industry is very, very busy with this. So also part of my job is talking with companies, and all of the companies who are sourcing ingredients are busy with their backup strategy. So everyone is looking at, for example, what happened to the price of eggs in the last couple of years. And all of the big bakery companies are thinking, oh, that is a very painful dependency that we have. Or when war in Ukraine broke out and there was suddenly a shortage of sunflower oil, all of the food industry was in panic. How are we going to replace this? What's our backup option? Also in this domain of protein diversification, when we look at risk in our food portfolio, the risk of egg ingredients, the risk of dairy ingredients, with an animal disease outbreak, those are very fragile. And these are specialty ingredients. I'm not talking about food autonomy on a sort of macronutrient level, but without a good foamer, you can't have a cappuccino. Without a good binder, you can't have your morning muffin, etc. So I think on this topic of risk management, there is a lot of discussion still to be had, and one where policymakers and the food industry can find each other, because the food industry is willing to invest. So if we're looking for private sector money, I think this is one that we could make a more prominent part of the discussion. On my next slide, I have an overview of the solutions that we're seeing, or the different sort of buckets of protein. Again, wanting to acknowledge there will be people who are very enthusiastic for certain ones of these, and people who have an allergy, or a sort of, no, not that, that feels threatening to me, or that's not a thing I want to go. My message for today, and the atmosphere that I would like to kick off this dialogue with, is an acknowledgement that these are actually far more complementary than they might seem at first glance. So if we just look at, for example, increasing cultivation of pulses, I think that's a fantastic way for us to produce more protein in Europe. It's probably the most effective short-term solution that we can think of. However, as soon as we're working to increase the protein content of pulses, we're creating a side stream that is low protein and high carbohydrates. So it's got fibers and it's got starches. And that is a fantastic feedstock for a fermentation. So pulses and fermentation become very complementary. And fermentation, by the way, if we do a biomass fermentation or use a traditional fermentation to upcycle a low quality plant stream, that is a fantastic resource for feed. So we have this loop in which these become a sort of cascading complementarity of proteins. And I want to say that as Europe, if we are going to become protein self-sufficient, I think we are going to need all of these, and we're going to need to dig into that complementarity. If we don't dig into the complementarity, we're going to risk creating competing solutions where we have a competition for biomass, basically just for the raw material. So we need to start already now, instead of talking about, is it going to be fermentation? Is it going to be pulses? Is it going to be cultured meat? Is it going to be plant-based? We need to start already now envisioning a food system where these coexist, where there is complementarity, where there are flows between them, and where we're finding the synergies between these different solutions. And I think with that, that is what I wanted to introduce to you today. So the invitation, number one, be aware of what your motivators are and welcome the other person's motivators to the table. And number two, start to think in the complementarity and synergy between the solutions rather than either or. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stacey. And in a way, also a hopeful message, because there's so many reasons as to why we could support protein diversification that we can therefore also find allies in very various places. So, and your second message of complementarity, of course, means that it doesn't need to be an against and a fight, but how do we build it all together? Mindful of time, I'll just allow one question for Stacey, and then if you have more questions, we can see at the end. If there's any questions online or in the room, please raise your hand. Yeah, very good. Then we'll move on. And I still have a question for you later, but then we'll come back to it. All right. Then keep all your questions, write them down, and then it'll be a lot of questions at the end. So very good. So now that we're all on the same page on protein diversification, let's move on to what consumers think of this. Panel one, ask a simple yet tough questions. How do we earn consumer trust in safety and health? On affordability, taste, and clarity. And for this panel, I have Olivia Brown, Policy Officer from Euroconsumer, Els Bedert, Director Policy, Product Policy and Sustainability at Eurocommerce, and then Guillaume Millet, with two hats, President of Plant-Based Food Europe and Vice President of Plant-Based of Danone. Olivia, starting with you, you're multifaceted consumer rights advocates. You've worked on many different topics, and one of them is emerging consumer trends. And that has led you to work on cultivated meat, which is probably the most polarizing topic within the most polarizing topic. So we go straight into it. You've done quite a bit of research on that, working with consumers on their perceptions, what it takes to earn their trust, but also asking first the question, how much trust is there already? Could you share a little bit more on what you've done and some of the key takeaways.
Thank you so much. And thank you firstly for organizing this discussion. I think it's a terrific topic and I'm so glad that we're having it here. As you mentioned, I'm here on behalf of Euroconsumers. So for those of you who aren't aware, we're a group of consumer rights organizations with members in Belgium, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Poland. And together we represent about 6 million consumers worldwide. Maybe to backtrack to explain how we've ended up with cultivated meat so early in the morning, I should explain we're an organization that's committed to empowering consumers. If you're empowering consumers, that means you're giving consumers the agency, the authority to make the choices that best suit them. And that's why I'm so happy already with how this discussion started this morning, with the emphasis on choice, on the emphasis on balance. It's not a case of one in, one out. We're looking to diversify, meaning we're looking to expand the options that are available to consumers so that consumers can choose what is the protein source that best suits them. As you mentioned, we've carried out a study recently on consumer sentiment towards novel proteins, and we chose cultivated meat. I can explain how we ended up with cultivated meat. I know that might be a little bit surprising for many. That's kind of why we did it. If we're looking at all the different novel proteins that are currently available, if you can we see cultivated meat as being particularly ambitious and also particularly challenging. It holds many potential opportunities in terms of sustainability, in terms of the potential health benefits, and also in terms of our competitive goals. It also can be a little bit divisive. So if we can get positive consumer sentiment on this particular, I don't know what to say at this point with it, this particular option, then we can have a good foundation of how to build consumer trust in the other options as well. But I want to stress this doesn't mean that I'm here as a cultivated meat advocate. I'm here as a consumer advocate, and I'm advocating for consumer choice. Maybe you mentioned a little bit already about the motivations. I want to take a step back and look at some of the barriers towards protein diversification. In our survey, we asked consumers about their meat intake and what they would do, what are the barriers they face around meat reduction. Again, I am not saying that meat is bad here, but just to give a kind of an opposite angle in this. Firstly, our survey found that only a small minority of consumers have stopped eating meat or intend to stop eating meat entirely. In fact, the majority were happy to reduce the amount of meat they eat without giving it up altogether, which again shows that consumers are looking for a balance here. When we asked the consumers who said they're not giving up meat at all, why is that the case? They had a couple of different reasons. The first one is some people just like the taste of meat, and that's okay. Others said they found it to be a significant part of their culture and their traditions, so they found it difficult to start adopting other proteins in their diet. And for many, they said that they thought meat was a better source of protein. In other words, people are eating meat for a variety of reasons. So if we want them to diversify their options, we need a range of alternative proteins that will appeal to many, and crucially, that is affordable to all. We had data that showed that many of the consumers we asked found that the current alternative proteins were too expensive. Looking at cultivated meat in particular, they said they only thought it would be successful if it was an affordable option, cheaper than traditional meat. The big news is there was interest in trying cultivated meat, despite what you may hear at the moment around certain policy discussions. 50% of those surveyed said they would be willing to try if it was EFSA approved. The most enthusiastic ones were consumers who had already reduced their meat consumption or were looking to do so. And of those who said they weren't intending to reduce their meat consumption, 43% said they would consider trying cultivated meat, which shows we're still a little bit curious. It's not a black and white situation. There is a checklist that consumers have when it comes to what would encourage them to try cultivated meat. And I'm really conscious of time, so I'm going to give you a quick rundown. And if you have more questions, we can follow up later. The first one is it has to be safe to eat. I mentioned already consumers want it to be EFSA approved, and they're very conscious of the impact of cultivated meat on their personal health. 55% were worried about any long-term health risks, but at the same time, 38% said they would try it if it was better for their health. This shows that we need the kind of in-depth studies you were talking about into what the impact of cultivated meat is. I've mentioned it already, price. Throughout all of the policy work I do, it always comes back to affordability and price. In fact, we ran in a survey at the start of this mandate. We called it our election survey, where food affordability and food sustainability was a big, big ask for consumers. 61% said they believed cultivated meat would only be successful if it is affordable to everybody. Taste is super important. 48% said they'd only buy cultivated meat if it tastes like the real deal. And And maybe just quickly to end on this last point, there's a real need for information. Only 13% of those consumers we surveyed said they felt informed about cultivated meat. So I know there's a lot of talk at the moment around bans on in certain countries, for example, but I really do think a lot of that comes from a lack of information. If we want consumers buying, we need to take them from the very first stages and keep them completely informed of what this means for them. And also being clear that we're not looking to replace anything entirely, but just giving them another option that maybe could suit their lifestyle better than what's currently out there. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Olivia. And I think what's super important in what you said is also that consumers are not a monolithic group. Like they have many different reasons to do many different things. And often we forget that and put them in a few categories of either you eat meat or you don't eat meat. So very helpful to show that it's much more nuanced than this. Now, Els, over to you. You represent the voice of retail and wholesale. Many say one of the most important stakeholders in this whole discussion on protein diversification. Now, what Olivia has been sharing on the sentiment on cultivated meat is, of course, one way to understand what consumer wants, but another one is to look at what is happening in the stores themselves. And how do European retailers evaluate this consumer trust in protein diversification? And what are they doing, if anything, to increase this trust?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the European Food Forum invitation and for Mrs. Borzan for hosting this. I'm sure this is not the last discussion, so I'm very happy to be part of this as well, but I'm sure there will be many more occasions. So we European organization representing retail and wholesale, national association, and a broad variety of all the shops that you know that you see in your daily lives. I'm really very happy to guide you through the supermarket in this debate. We have to move from the survey to the actual real life. So this is hopefully I can shed some light. It is our role to get food to the table. This is what the sector stands for. This is what our essential mission is, basically, together with our suppliers. And we need to ensure this broad choice. We've heard it already, we'll hear it many more times. There is a variety of consumers with their own needs and expectations. So we really want to give the opportunity to give them a balanced a diet. It's in our DNA to understand what the consumer wants, what they will buy, and what they will come back for to the store. This is really what we do on a daily basis. It really makes for us commercial sense as well to really keep a very close touch on the consumer demand. It's a very competitive sector. You see many different retailers in the same street even. How do you make sure that your client comes back to the store? How do you do that? Because you want to offer the right product for this person is looking for. So I think this is, of course, where we start. This is our role, and this is where we really need to understand consumer acceptance, consumer trust. I just need to repeat that the main determinant, of course, is the consumer acceptance is really, it has to live up to expectations. Expectations linked to the conventional products that people are used to, but also about other issues such as sensorial taste and smell and all these issues that are very important in food. And we know that there are different angles. We've heard it already, and I can only stress that price, I will not mention it again, it comes back again and again for is a very major driver in store. And the health aspect, we've also heard it as well. This is, we do our report as well with consumer services. We see this actually remains very high interest driving consumers, how they as a driver for their sales. So this is high, and we see it as well when there are new trends coming up. It's often driven by a health aspects. So it's not based on a single aspect. That makes it very challenging to actually address all these aspects as a retailer and actually answer to this very diversified consumer base. For us, what has changed a lot and what's making it very difficult is indeed, as just mentioned as well, where do consumers get the information, who is influencing them. It has changed dramatically with the internet, social media. There's a lot of information getting to the consumer that then are supposed to make up their own minds. And not all information is science-based or even trusted. So how can we make sure that, that the consumer actually feels confident about the product? And this, I think, where we have a role as well. We take up this role as a retail sector, that we also help them with that knowledge. And again, here you will see on their websites or brochures, really to help in the view of the diet aspect. We don't sell individual products. We make sure that there's a range of products that people feel comfortable to choose. And I think when we talk about alternative proteins and about plant-based products, I mean, the good thing indeed is that it works both on health and on sustainability. So it's actually good for many sides. It's not just one little aspect. It's and that's why I think we are also very curious and interested in that. And we, of course, we follow these trends, but we see that they can change quite quickly. New trends can come and go very quickly, often even also driven by social media. And this is maybe also one of the main challenges. How this health discussion and how it's influenced on a daily basis and how to react. And we have heard from our members as well. A product can be completely, demonized from one day to the next, or there's a very big demand for it, and that is a challenge for our sourcing that our retailers do. But I have to come back that it is about maintaining taste and affordability to make this transition and to make sure that it's part of the daily eating habits. This really has to come in. And lastly, also the other challenge, of course, is the slow change of process that we see. We have consumer behavior is not something that changes overnight for the reason that we've also heard. But I think if we go for the benefits, I think it's very clear for our sector, for our members, we have a role to play. We are in the public eye. We have an expectation from policymakers, from NGOs, from the shareholders and from the consumers to take steps in this, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to provide healthy diets. There's a market opportunity. You can differentiate yourself from your competitors if you expand a certain range. So there are definitely opportunities for the sector as well to do this. So again, as I said, I can take you in the store. You will see how it changes. You can see that the consumer and the product offer changes, and this, of course, a following on from the social debate and societal debate. And what I want to say is that indeed, so I think what we can see now is it's not all the retailers, not our members will go on the same speed. Because you have a different consumer base, because you're working in a different country where there's maybe a different political sentiment or NGO presence, or I don't know what I can refer to, but it's not the same demand or expectation across the EU. So we see, but we can say that everybody's looking at it. All members are looking at it, but maybe they have their own different steps. They take smaller steps, or they really carve out where they want to focus on, which is in line with their business strategy. So everybody's working on it with different speeds and different aspects. I mean, I can mention, I think they're very interesting reports that you also can find publicly, or initiatives. It's about working with startup, for example, our railway member works close with startup, and to make sure that they help the products to go to the market. We've got the little strategy for planetary health diet. We have Ahold Delhaize, who actually also committed to a certain plant-based share with animal products. So, and even on the level of the Danish government, of course. And we see all these movements, and it's actually there with every individual, every member. I think I can conclude it is happening, the shift is happening. How can we accommodate the consumers with this? We offer it, we make sure that they have the right information at hand. But at the same time, we focus on diets. We need to make sure that there is continued consumer education backed up by science, definitely. Yes, definitely, I can only repeat that. And we as a business are listening, and we will continue to develop our own initiatives in the field. Thank you.
Well, very hopeful to hear you say that the shift is happening. A lot of things are happening, of course, in supermarket, but for things to happen in supermarket, there needs to be products in the supermarkets. Guillaume, as we said, you have two hats today. On one end, President of Plant-Based Food Europe, working on policy, but today I would rather ask you a question on the part of Danone, and especially Alpro. We've heard a lot from Els on the importance of taste, of availability, affordability. New trends can come and go. How do you navigate that at Alpro? How have you done it quite successfully over the last few years?
Thanks again for the invitation and the debate. I've already heard just really interesting stuff just from the retailers that are just starting to shift also some questions On protein diversification, first, good news, at least, and I speak from Danone, which I think is a very interesting case in terms of diversification. It's already happening. So just if you allow me to correct a bit some, let's say, messages that were passed at the very beginning, the plant-based food in Europe is really very, very dynamic. Just the plant-based milks has increased 50% since 2019. So in the last years, really, there has been a tremendous acceleration. We are present in more than 50% of the European households as a staple already. The plant-based alternative to yogurt also are accelerating very, very fast. And for me, just an observation from Danone, our biggest brand now in Europe is a plant-based one. So Alpro is the biggest brand of Danone in Europe and one of the fastest growing. So protein diversification is happening in Europe. I believe what is also striking, and for me, that's really something that we need just to take into consideration. The penetration level I was mentioning, so 50%, is 10 points higher on the new generation. So there's a wave of new consumers that are just from the start being educated, used to different tastes, different benefit, different textures. And again, it's not opposing one to the other, but they live with those two realities. Just have a look and just go to a coffee shop here. You will see plenty of offers. And that's what diversification is. So on Monday, you take just a latte. The second day, you take a coconut matcha. And the third day, an almond iced cappuccino. So that's really protein diversification in motion. And we are very happy also to leverage this with one, manufacturing in Europe, and second, also with leveraging agriculture. Almonds are all coming from Europe. Oats are all coming from Europe. Soy also mostly coming from Europe. So it's really about what you said, just partnering from all the value chain up to retailers also, because we're happy just to partner with retailers just into this switch. So how are we managing this, the trust with the consumers? First, let's say first IDs. For us, we have done a big shift. One, we stopped some practice that I observe sometimes still in the sector. We stopped lecturing and blaming consumers. So there was a big lecturing practice in the industry of novel alternative protein. Hey, what you've done in the past is bad. And this is not working, just not working for consumers. They don't want to be blamed. They don't want to be lectured. They want to be invited and excited. So we've really totally shifted that. Second, it all starts with taste. We've been recrafting all our products just to make sure that they taste good, that they are really as minimally processed as possible, and that they bring additional benefits. And on taste, I just want to add one additional thought. When you look at the subcategories on plant-based, especially the one I know, some are really working very, very nicely, in just an alternative to yogurts, alternative to milks. Some are more struggling, so alternative to cheese, to meat, just to name a few. The very big difference between both, I observe that one is still stuck in what I call mimicking, so trying to mimic the taste of the animal base. And this, for me, I believe is really a dead end. If you just try to copy, but in more expensive, in more or less the same, you will probably appeal to a very limited just amount of people. Where we've really seen as an industry, not only speaking for Danone, by the way, and a very big uptake is when we started to introduce almond milk, for instance. And almond milk never intended to copy dairy milk, never. On the opposite, it's bringing additional benefits. So a lighter texture, a very strong nutty taste, just fiber and so on, that we managed just to really just interest and excite consumers just to have a shift. So really mimicking is a dead end. Blaming is also a dead end. What we need to do is excite, bring exciting products, so different textures and benefits. When you look at protein, of course, we have just a very big challenge. I just also want to flag that what Europe lacks the most is probably fiber. And fiber, I think the plant-based food is the best position. You know that, let's say, fiber is essentially or almost uniquely, except probably wool, is coming from plants. So here we have a massive role to play. Last topic, how to create that. We need just to create, let's say, exciting experiences. So really on sensorial, additional benefit, but also to ground it in current habits. Of course, consumers, they move slow, as you said. So if you can really relate to their current experience, so just to say, hey, try it in your coffee, try it in your overnight oats, in your cooking recipe, see in your crepes, it will just elevate or change your recipe. That's where really we managed to get a breakthrough. Last 3 or 4 callouts for me as, let's say, what do we need? Because we still need help. We need help from policymakers. Local country, we still see sometimes 10 points of VAT difference in some countries. So talking about diversification, we need fair treatment. Germany, Italy, just to name a few. So really, for me, that's mandatory if we are just, let's say, serious about diversification. That's the first stuff. Second, I was talking about new generation kids. We need to educate kids from the very beginning. School schemes today is only just funding, let's say, the dairy single alternative. So for me, just it's not about just putting one versus the other. It's just proposing choice, as you said, options. Last but not least, just a small message to retail. I think it's very good, and we are just totally partnering to that. It's probably also good to look at their own margin equation just to make sure that they don't take more margin on alternative protein than on the more conventional one. And so that's an invitation for the sector just to really be true to protein diversification.
So no mimicking, no lecture, exciting, a lot of fiber. And then we'll get there. But thanks a lot for the exciting. It shows also a different picture that it's actually moving forwards. We've talked about trust on the consumer side, but yes, we need trust at the checkouts, but we also need it at the farm gates and at the factories. The second panel looked at the supply side. What does it take for farmers, producers, and innovators to trust that diversification is investable? I'm joined by 4 people for this panel. Niels Peter Nurring, the Climate and EU Director from the Danish Agriculture and Food Council. Claudia Haschil, Head of Corporate Communication and Sustainability at Ruggenwalder Müller. Carlo Bulkmans, Director Scientific Affairs at Vivici. And Hidde Boersma, Senior Policy Advisor, Agriculture and Conservation at We Planet. Niels, you've worked for 40 years at the intersection of national, European, and global agriculture policies, and you've had a particular focus on sustainability. Recently, you've played a key role in the tripartite agreement in Denmark, of which one of the outcome, of course, was a plant-based action plan. And I think many here in this room, but also outside of this room, still see this as a pipe dream for Europe. So it would be great to hear your thoughts on how did you achieve to bring everyone together around this shared agenda? And most importantly, what do you see as the future for farmers in protein diversification? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I think there should also be a slide. But let me start by putting protein diversification into a global context by 5 figures. 1.5, 40, 800, 30, and 0. Some of you may know them. Some of you perhaps not. The 1.5 is from the Paris Agreement, which states very clear that global temperature increase must stay below 1.5. This is very important. We have to reduce our emissions in all society, but also in the agricultural sector. Then the 40. It's the global demand for food. It will increase by 40% from now and until 2050. And we're coming from a situation with 800. 800 million people are going to bed every day hungry. So feeding the world is not just a problem in 2050, it's already a big challenge. 30, the agriculture sector and food production has a big responsibility because we have 30% of the global emissions worldwide. And the 0, the last figure, 0, it's controversial because it states that we are not able to take 1 more hectare into production. So we have to produce more to a growing population, but we have to do it with less pressure on the environment, less pressure on nature, and less pressure on the climate. Next slide, please. When we talk about protein diversification, the debate is, as already mentioned in the introduction by you and by others, often very polarized. It quickly becomes plant versus animal or new versus traditional. When that is said, many Europeans and many people in the developed countries could, or rather should, eat less meat and more plant-based. That would be very, very good for the health, and that would be very good for the climate, environment, and nature. There's no single protein source that can solve all the challenges we face. We need plant-based, animal-based, and new types of proteins. That is what protein diversification really means. Diversification and not substitution. And the farmer's perspective is about trust and business models. Farmers produce what the market demands. Farmers invest when there's a predictable demand and a viable business case. This applies when proteins come from a cow, a potato, or a steel tank. If we want farmers on board, we need to talk about opportunities, not exclusions, not shaming farmers. Farmers can be food producers, protein producers, and suppliers of biomass for new technologies. But farmers can not be expected to drive the market. That responsibility lies with the market, the food industry, and policymakers. We are in the Danish Agricultural and Food Council very open to proteins for feed or for food. We are open to production of proteins in the stables, on the fields, or in steel tanks. It is not either or. It is all three of them. And we have to listen to the consumers, and the farm society and the food industry will deliver the products the consumers demand. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Niels. And in a way, I recognize some similarity with what Guillaume was saying. It's no shaming, but creating opportunities, excitement, and how those things can all work together. So thanks a lot for sharing this farming perspective. We're moving on now to Claudia, who is joining online. You are here to represent Rügen Waldermüller, started as a meat company and is now diversified. And if I'm correct, about half of the portfolio is now plant-based, which is really impressive. And again, shows a real diversification strategy. Must have been quite a journey. How have you managed to do this successfully, and what's in store for the future? Floor is yours, Claudia.
Thank you very much. I think I have also some slides. Yeah, there you are. So thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I'm very happy to share our perspective. I don't have to say so much about us, as you already said. Yes, we are We were a traditional butcher in 1834, so quite a long history. And yeah, we were a classic meat and sausage producer, and started 2014 with vegetarian alternatives. And yeah, we got not applause by our competitors and the industry, because this was the time where not the retails were full of vegan and vegetarian products. So a lot of people were thinking, what the hell are they doing? But yeah, we really got successful with our products, and today we are the market leader in plant-based meat and sausage alternatives, and yeah, one of Europe's leading plant-based brands. And we do already 70%, I can say now, with our plant-based products, and 30% with our meat-based products. So the thing is, I want to say is, we are not a startup, and we are not driving by ideology. Our transformation towards protein diversification was a strategic business decision at the time, driven by market risks, changing consumer demand, and the long-term food security. So a lot of things I will say to you, you have already heard this morning. So next slide, please. Yeah, we've heard this today a lot. As we're producing both meat and plant-based products, this means we cannot ignore the impacts of either. So this is why our approach has never been an either or. It is always an end. Like, so this is what a lot of people said today as well, is this exactly how this debate should be. So next slide, please. Yeah, we have heard already this morning a lot of why protein diversification matters, why it matters to us. So it is often discussed as a moral or kind of lifestyle question, but from an industry perspective, this is something else. This is risk management. Stacey already mentioned this morning, like climate change, geopolitical tensions, price volatility. This has already affecting supply chains and raw material costs. So relying on only one single protein source is no longer really a resilient strategy, not for us as an industry, but not also for our food system in general. So at the same time, animal protein alone will struggle to secure affordable access to high quality protein in the long run. So the diversification really creates resilience, like for farmers, as we just heard, for food companies, but also, and this is the most important, for the consumers. So the real question is not whether diversification will happen, but whether we manage it proactively or react too late. Next slide, please. And you ask why incumbents really hesitate, why they were not to double down. This was really the question. So if protein diversification is so logical, so why are many established players are still hesitant to double down? From our experience, there are three main barriers on this. So firstly, we have unclear policy signals. We have ongoing debates about labeling, we have fragmented national rules, we have a regulatory uncertainty, and this increases risks for long-term investments. And as we already said this morning, this is a long-term discussion we have here. And yes, long-term discussions or long-term developments, they take long. This is a little bit inconvenient, but that is the case. And second is the missing demand security. Without a stable, predictable demand, especially in food service or public procurement, scaling up still remains very difficult. For example, we are a fully retail consumer brand, but of course we also see other possibilities, but it's not so easy to start there. And third, it's a high transition risk still. Like diversifying proteins, they requires capital and new supply chains and close integration with agriculture. And companies do invest, but only when the risks are manageable and shared. So next slide, please. So then we come to what can Europe do now to speed up? If we want industry and also farmers, we've heard that before, and it's yeah, to invest at scale, then Europe can actively unlock this transformation. And I see three concrete levers. And the first is make it easy to choose. we talked a lot about the consumers, we heard a lot about this, and we really need more scientific studies that really look out like intervention studies that really we have more data on vegan and vegetarian nutrition and what this makes with health. And we need a better integration of plant-based proteins into official dietary guidelines. And we need communication that brings people together. We heard that a lot today, and this is like we also as a company approach that, like that together instead of polarizing, focus on everyday relevance and not really on dogma. And second, of course, we have to make it investable. Protein diversification requires a long-term capital, and public funding should therefore focus on de-risking innovation, which is, yeah, of course, quite expensive, and especially in fermentation, or biotechnology and modern breeding as well. So strong public research and innovation funding shifts in early stage, that the risk goes a little bit away from companies and enables private investments to follow. So this means targeted investments into protein diversifications, like on processing, on infrastructure and supply chains, and also make clear demand anchors, for example, through public procurement in schools, hospitals, or even canteens. Denmark is, for example, a good example for that. And thirdly, make it feasible for farmers and the industry. Then, as we've heard before, we a little bit sit here on the same table. Like an active agricultural policy is needed, including research, funding, and long-term partnerships between farmers and food companies. For example, we get our soya for our products more than 30% now from German farmers, and we have contracts with them, or we get a lot of our raw materials from Germany as well. So this works when you have like stable relationships. And also we need regulatory sandboxes to enable new technologies, so that we have legal, secure spaces where innovation can be tested and scaled without years of uncertainty. And I'm sorry to say, I'm afraid I can't spare you that at the end here. We should really stop the planned EU naming ban. A consumer needs clarity and orientation and not confusion. And the industry also needs reliable framework and conditions. So clearly established terms build trust and support also market uptake. Like trust grows when the risk is shared. And so let me come to the end. Protein diversification is not about replacing one system with another. We have heard this already today. It is about a complementarity, like resilience and also affordability. And if Europe wants a food system that is competitive, socially fair, and future-proof, we must now create the conditions that make diversification a rational choice for farmers as well as industry alike. So thank you.
Great. It took a full hour to talk about the veggie burger ban, but here we are.
Sorry.
No, very, very good. It's important to name things. Yeah, very inspiring. Thanks so much, Claudia, for sharing. Maybe the best I can share with you is that yesterday I was mentioning to a few German friends that you were going to speak at the event, and they're like, please let them come to Belgium supermarket. I always need to stock up when I go to Germany. So you have potential clients here already.
Yeah,
so
glad to hear that.
thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, moving on now to you, Carlo. You have worked for nearly 3 decades in the food and feed ingredient industry, and you now sit at the forefront of new protein production technology. We've talked a lot about trusts going in one way, but on the other hand, you also need trust to make sure that you can invest, that startups can become scale-ups, can become industries, and actually have a market to sell. Can you tell a bit more about the current hurdles that you're seeing, and also how you see it moving forward to develop the fermentation industry?
Thank you for the invitation. So I work for Vivici. Vivici is a startup company in precision fermentation. Precision fermentation is actually putting yeast cells to work to produce nutritious, healthy, and safe proteins for our consumers in Europe. At its core, advanced fermentation is an industrial way of turning European biomass, sugars, side streams, and nutrients into high-value proteins and ingredients with a smaller environmental footprint and with far less land use and that would be required for conventional protein expansion. Now that matters actually for three reasons. First of all, sustainability. Advanced fermentation allows part of our protein and ingredient supply to be decoupled from land-intensive production, easing pressure on ecosystems while reducing emissions and pollution when it replaces higher impact inputs and improves resources efficiency. It also fits with the circular bioeconomy, using co-products, regional feedstocks, and creating predictable long-term demand for European crops and byproducts. Importantly, and this is not theoretically, by 2014, the precision and biomass fermentation could supply over 22 billion tons of products, food and feed ingredients globally, with significantly lower land and water use compared to conventional expansion. A landmark study by Systemic and the Good Food Institute, which is about to be published today, clearly highlights that potential. Second, food security. Europe is structurally exposed to proteins and key inputs. Advanced fermentation adds resilience by diversifying supply, shortening value chains, and creating controllable year-round production capacity. Now, for the EU specifically, scaled fermentation can help narrow the protein deficit that exists in Europe, reducing the reliance on imported soy for feed and lowering overall feed demand, while creating new outlets for cereals, sugars, and starches. This is not a replacement narrative. It is a risk management narrative for a food system that is under continuous growing climate, trade, and geopolitical stress. And third, competitiveness. Advanced fermentation is a strategic manufacturing capability. Bioprocess engineering, enzymes, downstream processing, and industrial biotechnology. With a moderate policy support, the EU precision and biomass fermentation market could reach around 7.8 billion by 2040. With a full value chain opportunity, it could reach 12 billion. Now, if you also take into account indirect effects, the sector could contribute over 21 billion annually to the EU economy, support close to 60,000 jobs by 2014, and generate trade flows comparable to established EU exports. If Europe gets the framework right, this value, the talent, and the IP will stay here in Europe. If not, scale up will happen in the US, Asia, and Europe will import those products at a high price. Importantly also, this direction is not speculative. A forthcoming EIT Food Protein Diversification Foresight report, due at the end of February, identifies advanced fermentation as a critical pathway to strengthen Europe's food security, sustainability, and competitiveness. It is grounded in life cycle and economic evidence, showing major emission reductions, lower land and water use, and new income opportunities across the agri-food value chain. So what needs to change to achieve all of this? Two things. First of all, in terms of regulatory, we need speed, predictability, and coherence grounded firmly in science-based risk assessment rather than political categorization. Today, Timelines and uncertainty are killing for innovation. The EU should strengthen EFSA capacity, make pre-submission support systematic, clarify data requirements, and create faster, proportionate routes to market for well-characterized product categories so that regulatory treatment reflects evidence and safety, not perceived novelty. Then the industrial policy. Treat advanced fermentation as a strategic manufacturing sector, not as a niche food trend. That means faster permissions for biomanufacturing sites, support for industrial clusters, pragmatic rules for using sustainable biomass at site streams. But it also means targeted public investment to de-risk innovation, which allows and unlocks private capital for sustained support for R&D and scale-up infrastructure over the coming decade, which is essential for Europe. In short, the opportunity is real, but the momentum is not guaranteed. If the EU wants sustainable competitiveness, it must replace uncertainty with a predictable runway, with clear rules, faster market access, and financial support.
Carlo, it seems like you were playing bingo with Stacey's first slides. Environment, food security, economy. Just ticked it all. Yeah, you've won today. Thank you very much. Moving on to the last speaker of this panel, Hidde, you're a bit of a jack of all trades, a PhD in soil microbiology, filmmaker, writer, policy advisor, co-founder. I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot of things.
Sounds like a lot.
That's only during the day. But you're also a strong proponent of land sparing. I saw you nod very strongly when Niels was saying 0 more land. I was like, yes. And that often leads to, I've seen heated debates on your LinkedIn or on other people's LinkedIn as well. But today you're actually here to say that the protein question shouldn't be as heated and that maybe it's time to take it out of the culture war. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm here to defuse the culture war a little bit, which is a little out of my comfort zone often because I like the polemics. But that said, I'm here on behalf of We Planet, and we're still quite a novel NGO. We're a little bit the odd one out, I think. So we are advocating for land sparing, doing more on little land. We advocate for energy abundance and for global prosperity. And indeed, we are staunch advocates for innovation in the food sector. So we are staunch advocates for cultured meat and precision fermentation. And I still think that there's no need for a culture war. And you already started this this morning with saying that justifiably saying that this is an immensely polarized debate. And it says something. I'm already, I think, 20 years working in the food sector, and I started my career in the GMO discussion, which was also immensely polarized. I remember the early, I don't know, like 2005, 2010, there were people discussing if GMOs could give autism and cancer. And I remember that once I was in a panel, somebody actually argumentating that GMOs could make you gay. So I've seen the polarized debate already, but this one is also fascinating because we have bans before the product is already on the market, before it's even approved, before the sector can even get started. And I think I have 3 slides to show that the whole culture war is actually, it's constructed and it's there's no need for it. And maybe it's good to start with the conclusion of all those 3 graphs, and that's I think the key sentence is that I do not think, really believe that not a single farmer in the European Union will go out of business through cultured meat or precision fermentation. And I think I have 3 graphs to prove this. This is the first one. It shows how much more proteins we need in the coming 25 years. And I actually plan to say that the amount of proteins we need in Europe is actually plateauing, but I just learned from Stacey that if we want strategic autonomy, we even need to produce more proteins in Europe. And who are going to do that? Of course, farmers are going to do this. The farmers, I think, have a problem. Can I have the next slide? And that is that a lot of farmers are aging. This is the Dutch situation, and it shows on the blue bars the amount of farmers who are over 50, and that's almost 60. It's now it's more than 75% of the farmers in the Netherlands, and I have no. I think that the same accounts in the rest of Europe. That the majority are very old and they're almost retiring, and a lot of them have no successor. So there will be less farmers in the future. So this means that there will definitely be space. If we need to produce more proteins, more food with less farmers, that must mean that there is space for protein diversification. So if I look at 2050, there is space for both. I would definitely make the case that we need each other. If we want strategic autonomy, if we want different tastes, if we want to produce enough food, we need those farmers. We need those food innovators, and together we will make Europe great again. Thank you.
Great. Not only did you have great grasp, but you also were well on the time. So
I know.
managed to give us some time back. So kort en bondig, as they say in Dutch. So very, very clear, but very clear message. Thanks a lot. This was the second part of the discussion, and now we're moving on to the last part. What can the EU do? And a few things were mentioned already. Comes down to the level playing field, I believe, and a few of you will be talking about that. But in this discussion, MEP Borzan, you'll be sharing a few words. Then Brian Winter, Vice Dean from Technical Science, Aarhus University. Siske Potti, Secretary General from the European Alliance for Plant-Based Foods. Rafael Pinto, Senior Policy Manager for the European Vegetarian Union. And last but not least, Olivier Janin, Director General, Food Manufacturing Technologies, Europe. And then we'll do our best to still have some time for questions at the very end. Good, MEP Borzan, you sit on the IMCO committee, you're a substitute in ENVI, but most importantly, probably you work with EFSA, it's been mentioned already. Could you share a bit more on what you see as the key next policy developments and how you navigate that as a policymaker?
Thank you very much. I really like this kind of issues because I can combine both my roles here in Food Safety and Public Health Committee and Consumer Protection Committee. So I'm trying to be fair and to balance those two perspectives. Also, as a Parliament's representative in EFSA, it gives me even a broader picture, and it's easier for me to have really objective and scientific approach to those issues. When it comes to food, it comes to tradition. We are all so proud of our traditional way of making meals. We are also, for example, when we have a meal, I, as a person who comes from Croatia, when I have a meal here in Belgium, sometimes I'm a little bit surprised how it's prepared.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah. I was trying to be diplomatic. So I'm talking about traditional food that we normally eat in all European countries. So try to imagine what is going on when we have novel foods. But the experience shows that some novel foods are accepted more easily, like, for example, chia seeds. I think that not everybody, but I think many people today eat that kind of stuff because it's not so, it doesn't have any extreme taste. You don't think that you do, you think that you do something healthy for your body. But when it comes to meat, there are lots of differences between us and fear of something new. When we started to talk about worms in a flower, in a flower, or I don't know, grasshoppers or whatever, people were shocked. Also here in the Parliament, and I try to convince them that we are not forcing anybody to eat anything, and that they are going to be clearly informed about everything. One of the competencies of European Union is labeling, food labeling, or any labeling. So this is our responsibility as lawmakers to give people a chance to have informed choice. On the other hand, I have to say that those discussions in a parliament when it comes to food become, I would say, sometimes too emotional and not scientifically based. Unfortunately, one could say that I'm really experienced member of the parliament because this is my 4th term. But this term is so much different than the previous ones because, unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, many people voted for their representatives who are populists, extremists. So in previous terms, when we look at our plenary room, they were like in this small part in previous terms. Now, really huge part of our plenary room is full of that kind of populists who don't want to hear what science says. They just represent some people who inform themselves on social media and people who are really who can be easily convinced in many crazy things. Imagine, for example, 20 years ago, if somebody told you that we will have a discussion if flat is the Earth is flat, we would say no, it's impossible. But now it's like a valid point for discussion. So in these circumstances, I really don't have a straight answer what is going to happen. We, as a European Union, decided that we are not competitive enough when it comes to China, USA, and that we have to change our laws in a way that it should be more simple, that rules should be simplified. But unfortunately, I'm afraid that it's going to lead to deregulation. And that in the end, consumer, patient, I mean, people will be, they are always this weaker part. But unfortunately, I'm afraid that it is going to lead in a way that European Union as the brightest spot in the world when it comes to food safety, when it comes to innovation, it's that not so good times are ahead of us. I don't want to be pessimistic. It's not part of my character, but in the end, I have to be aware of what's going on. And this is the only way to try to prevent things, if it's possible. Now we will, in front of us, ahead of us is a so-called food safety omnibus. And for example, my job there is going to be to try to preserve what we have. So not so much going in advanced way, but to preserve what we already have and try to, if it's possible, to improve. But I'm really not sure what could I expect. So in the future, I think that we have to use all our, I mean, as a politician, I have I'm really very often present in media. So I use every opportunity not only to present myself, but to educate. I think that this is one of the roles of a politician. Unfortunately, it's not so fashionable today. So I think that we should use the power, not only politicians, but also NGOs, science or scientists, to use every tool we have to try to inform people in these really hard circumstances where expert opinion is on the internet on the same level of somebody who never was educated in that way. So times are really challenging. This is a very popular expression here, challenging. So times are very challenging, but to me, it gives a motivation to be even better.
Yeah, I think this was very valuable. I think we were in a room, even though there is diversity, where a lot of people nod all the time. And it is important to remind that not everyone nods all the time when we talk about protein diversification. And so how do we move it forward beyond this group and ensure that we can move forward, as you say, not only defend the things that have been won in the past. So thanks a lot for sharing that. Then, well, moving on to Brian, I think it's perfect because you were saying more science, going to a scientist. This was not staged, it's just good luck. Brian, you're the Vice Dean of Aarhus University. You also sit at the Center for Sustainable Agri-Food System and on the European Alliance for Agriculture and Foods. And you've worked exactly on what MEP Borzen was saying, strengthening the link between research and policy. And in light of that, could you share a little bit more about the Tech Protein Strategy 2035 and mostly why it matters right now?
Great, thank you. And I also have 2 slides, I think. But first of all, thank you, Ms. Borzen, for inviting me, and thank you for being the voice of science. I think in this time it's really important to say that narratives do not shape the physical reality, and we all have to live in that. I had planned to say a lot of things about our protein strategy. Just move on to the next slide, please. But so many things have already been said, and that raised other questions for me. So sorry if I go a bit off the beaten track, but I have a few things that came up here. Because it seems that we all agree very much. I'd like to throw in a few more stones on the road then. Dr. Pate mentioned 6 reasons to go into this. I would like to add a 7th, which we should not forget, which is water. The amount of water we use for our food production is immense. And with the climate changes that are going to come, no matter what we do now, the need for water will be even higher. So we need to look into that as well. This is why if you look at our little figure here in the upper left corner, we actually have the roots of these plants in there as well. Plants are part of the solution. We heard about the Danish tripartite. It started out as a climate initiative, but basically ended up as a nitrogen leakage initiative, making sure that we do not soil our waterways. So that is another part we really need to look into. Then we have talked a lot about proteins as something we eat, and you can see again, this is something that takes up a lot of our space as well. But I think it's important to raise that proteins also have functionality in the food we eat. So we heard about the egg crisis, and on Friday, I was at a reception where we had meringue served, but instead of using eggs, there was a pea protein that has been refined to serve as the emulsifier for that. So we also need to remember that proteins are not just nutrition; it's also part of the taste and the mouthfeel of what we eat, and we also need to investigate that. And that goes a little bit about this, against this new trend that we should not eat processed foods. I think we need to diversify the debate on processed foods as well, because some processing are going to be needed for us to eat the new proteins we need to start eating and still feel that this is food for us. There's a social demographic difference we haven't talked about. There's big cultural differences in Europe. We see it the way that the US is ahead of us in this as well. And for once, it's not a path to follow. But if we go in the direction we're going now, then in 10 years, 20% of our poorest people will only eat highly processed foods. And that is not very nutritious. We probably have too little protein right now, but if you go to the US, you can't buy anything without having the protein content labeled on it. Even a bag of nuts will have the protein content noted on it. But fibers are completely missing from this. I already heard somebody say that fibers are important as well. So we need to start thinking about this from a nutritional point of view. And Denmark has been marked as a lighthouse in some context, but I can tell you that the political debate on food prices in Denmark is still what is a pound of minced beef for pasta meat sauce. What's the price of that? And so those who need to make dinner in 20 minutes and pay for it, the mincemeat is still very much a parameter, and we need to address that. So I would not like to talk about food safety, but actually sovereignty. And for that, we need to acknowledge that right now, our food production in Europe is based on import of Russian gas to make fertilizer. We cannot produce the biomass we do without importing energy for fertilizers. And we import enormous amounts of feed for our animals. We have to make sure that we close this loop inside of Europe and do not depend on internal barriers. We have just opened our first CO2 to protein pilot plant, not lab scale, but actual pilot plant, where we do not use any more land. We simply take CO2 straight out of the air, add green electricity, and end up with a product that in Belgium was sold as corn, I think. So this fungus product, fermentation and precision fermentation are also very, very important. But we don't have to step from one to the other. There is the concept of hybrid foods. We can dilute our meat with other meats. We can dilute our dairy with other dairies. So there's stepping stones towards consumer acceptance here that we need to investigate. I'm speaking too much, so I'll stop now. But just one thing. We have EFSA, as you mentioned. And EFSA is, I don't think EFSA is being blamed too much. As a consumer, I would like food safety as well. What we need to do is to say, how can the research organizations in Europe meet EFSA so that the data we produce are done under a protocol so that EFSA can take over and build on top of what we do instead of having to start over? Because that way we can perhaps accelerate the process with 2 to 3 years. I'll shut up now, sorry.
Yes, the hybrid foods, first time they are mentioned, but also very interesting. And I think in the Netherlands, especially, we see more and more of those hybrid yogurts, hybrid meats. My mom used to do that when I was a teenager, and I didn't know. And I got very angry because, I was 14 and meat was important. And I said, oh, it doesn't taste well. And that's when she told me, I've been doing this for 2 years. So you just say it doesn't taste well because you realize. So I think this shows that, yeah, there's many different ways to actually bring more protein crops in a way that's easy to consumers. Siska, over to you. You founded the European Alliance for Plant-Based Food back in 2019, bringing together companies and organizations together to advance the plant-based foods in Europe. Now, beyond trust, which we've been talking a lot about today, what do you think is blocking the transition, and what has changed or maybe not changed in the last 6 years?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation, and congratulations to the European Food Forum and to MEP and Borsan to organize this. I'm very pleased with the discussion so far. It's very constructive. Of course, when you come at the end of the panel, a lot has been said, but I think we urgently need a clear strategic policy vision and also more policy support to transition towards more plant-rich diets. That's, of course, what the Plant-Based Food Alliance is all about. I think that the plant-based food value chain already offers a very powerful but very underused opportunity to contribute today to many challenges that Europe is facing. And it has been said by many other colleagues here around the table, it's a challenge on competitiveness, there's a challenge on food safety, but also on population health. And I think that the plant-based value chain already today is supporting tens of thousands of European jobs. It is already creating markets for farmers, and it demonstrates clearly Europe's strength in food innovation, like, for instance, the example of Carlo, but also food security and food safety. So this is already an established and a working value chain. So without going into further, because I also had a list of explanation on where we could bring advantage to competitiveness, for instance, I think I will focus, for the sake of time, Maren, because I know the time is running out, on what we need on policy support. So, and as you might have seen, we have created together with our partners from AV Pro, from South Europe and PBFE, we have created the Partners for Plant-Based Declaration. And that is in fact an overview of what we would like to see in policy to have support. So the first, I will list the main aspects of which is described in much more detail in the declaration, of course. But the first ask we have is a clear, dedicated, plant-based food value policy, vision, and action plan. And that, as has been said by many of the other speakers, should be holistic. It should be integrating agriculture. It should be integrating competitiveness, innovation, market development, and also health. I think that is a first clear ask, because without a vision, long-term star at the horizon, is difficult to navigate, and then we go in all different directions. What we also need is an ambitious European protein strategy. And this, of course, to boost European-grown food-grade protein crops to reduce the import dependency. I think it has been said by many other colleagues here around the table. And very crucial is the support to farmers. I think it all starts at the farm, I would say, and I think they need to be supported with incentives in the CAP, but also knowledge sharing. I think there's also a big demand in education, knowledge sharing, to be able to diversify, but also specific risk management tools, because of course it's a risk when they diversify. So that also needs to be managed, and I think the farmers need to be supported in that. But I also think, and it has been said, faster approval processes, also more investments in processing infrastructure, and also de-risking private investments, and that, of course, to boost the innovation and the further scale up of these technologies. And very important is a much stronger single market. Because, of course, today there is no real regulatory coherence in the different markets. And also we need enabling labeling rules. It has been said, but that is, of course, crucial to inform the consumer in a proper way. And also, I think also my colleague here, Guillaume, already alluded to a different VIT treatment in the different member states. So there is today no level playing field for the plant-based, and I think this is the basic need. So we need to start with a level playing field if we want to give all these different protein sources a chance. And then, of course, it's also important to really also emphasize the opportunity of the plant-based foods on fiber. I think lots has been said on protein, but I fully agree. I think for health issues, fiber and healthy fats, so the plant-based fats are key, are crucial for the health of the European citizens. So I think to conclude, as I said before, we fully agree it's not about replacing one system with another. It's really about adding more resilience, more food security, and also more choice, but also more competitiveness for Europe. Because if we do not invest in this, we see already a risk that Europe will be falling behind other regions which are moving faster to capture this growth and opportunity. Because I'm very pleased to hear that the companies in the room are very successful, but I had also many talks in recent months with many other companies in also alternatives, and they're struggling. They're struggling, and they're really asking, should we invest in Europe? Because there are other regions in the world like the US and China where it's more, where they're more welcome, where they're really taking the opportunity, the global opportunity faster. So it's a really plea to the policies, to the policymakers in Europe, be fast and also take this opportunity. I will leave it with this and answer questions in the discussion.
Great, yeah, super interesting to also see come together in concrete policy recommendations as well, because it's good to talk about where we need to go and this North Star, but also having very concrete next steps will also help to unlock those discussions. There's been a few talks about EFSA, so I'm doing a little promotion. There's going to be a fireside chat with the Executive Director and Chief Scientist of EFSA, hosted by MEP Borzan as well and organized by the forum. And also just to let you know that there will also, on these whole topics of dialogues and bringing people together, there will also be an effort from the forum to have structured dialogues on the EU foods policies and the future of it. Now, going to you, Rafael, I'll start with happy birthday, but not to you. Actually, yesterday, the call for a plant-based action plan turned 1 year, and you played a key role in getting that through the line. So congratulations. It'd be great to hear if you could share a bit more about the plan, but also why now, 1 year later, you actually think it's more relevant now than ever regarding some geopolitics that we are in.
Thank you, Maha. Thank you to the European Food Forum for organizing. Thank you, MEP Borgen. It's a pleasure to be here. One of the advantages to speak at the end of the event is that I can pinpoint something, the things that we discussed here. And looking at the title of our event is Building Trust in Protein Diversification. And actually, when I read this, I thought, building trust for whom? For consumers? Well, as we've heard, there's a consumer-led transition happening already in Europe. For companies and retailers, they are the ones driving most of the investment. For farmers, well, maybe not everyone is convinced, it's true, but every time we talk to farmers, they say the same thing. We'll produce whatever people want to eat. So it seems to me that the stakeholder that has the least trust in protein diversification today might actually be the policymakers. And it's not just a lack of support. A lot of them are actually trying to stop it. And in the last few years, like you mentioned, Maha, with a geopolitical crisis, it seems like this subject has become a paradox. It's used as an argument against itself. This might be something for Stacy to add to her argumentation as well. There might be a role to play by protein diversification in all of these geopolitical games. Because you see, protein diversification is an urgent matter, not despite of our times, but precisely because of them. We cannot afford to ignore it, regardless of our political side, of our ideology. We really need to go past this polarization. And there are a lot of historical examples showing that protein diversification has been key. And it's not just about the environment, just not about health, not just about animal welfare, but protein diversification, and we've heard this here today, is about efficiency. It's about sovereignty and just plain good sense economics. And it's as important, or I would argue even more important than any defense spending, that digital infrastructure or energy independence. During crises like the ones that we are experiencing, protein diversification can really be a matter of survival. And many geopolitical leaders have left a legacy on this front. We don't have to go very far. This parliament has a building named after Konrad Adenauer. There's a bust of him just a few meters from here in the corridors. He was the creator of the soy sausage during World War I. He then became the chancellor of Germany, and he wrote himself that the aim of his sausage was to help people consume less meat and more plant proteins. And I don't think anyone called him woke at the time. Meatless Mondays. A lot of our members across Europe and similar organizations across the world advocate for introducing meatless Mondays in schools, public canteens as a way to incentivize protein diversification. Well, it might be surprising, but it was not a group of hippies in California coming up with this idea. It was actually Herbert Hoover, later US president, that launched this campaign during World War I. In Japan, after World War II, the government launched a school program to fight malnutrition. And what was included in the school program? Well, it might surprise those who were here the last mandate during the school scheme discussions, but soy milk, tofu, and miso as key, efficient, and healthy protein sources. You think it was already here mentioned, you think weaning us off Russian gas has been difficult. Well, for decades, academics and activists warned politicians that dependence could backfire, that not investing in renewables would decrease our sovereignty and increase our costs. Now we are doing the exact same thing about our food system. And I'm not saying we need to stop producing anything. We are not fans of the stick policy. But with protein diversification and through protein diversification, Europe has an opportunity to rebalance our diets, our food system, and our geopolitical position. And history shows that this is simply inevitable. It has already been stated here as well that the choice isn't whether to diversify, but to do so thoughtfully, with planning, time, voluntary measures, and at a reduced cost, or rush and risk mistakes, exclusion, and ultimately failure. And of course, I'm not saying that we should just support plant-based foods during bad times. We should use them to prevent them. So perhaps it's time that we learn lessons from the past and from other sectors. It's time to trust that protein diversification is not a problem, but a solution, not a weakness, but a strength, not a lesser topic, as some consider, but an essential one that makes political legacies. Perhaps 100 years later, it might be time for the Hansen sausage. Now, with that said, for those who are convinced, the policy opportunities are endless. There are options for all the committees of this House, all the DGs at the Commission. The CAP, fisheries policies, public procurement, school scheme, promotion policy, cardiovascular health plan, biotech act, bioeconomy strategy, labeling rules, research and innovation funding, defense spending, trade agreements, or perhaps we could have an overarching EU plant-based action plan to address all of these issues. Maybe Hansen sausage is not quite as literal as Adenauer's. Maybe this could be it.
Thanks a lot. A walk through history to geopolitics. It's a good spice up as penultimate speaker. Definitely woke up the whole room. So thanks a lot for that. I'm going to use some of the examples. So I'm going to ask you to share those. I think if everyone is woke, no one is woke. So that can be a good way to show that this is not crazy asks. Thanks a lot, Raphael. And then last but not least, Olivier, you represent the manufacturing technologies in Europe. And I feel like too often it's a sector that is overlooked in the middle of the chain there, but yet also important. And so we're so happy to have you today. It'd be great if you could share how the sector is looking at protein diversification, and also if you have some examples that you can share of positive stories that has supported this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation to speak here. Indeed, as you mentioned, often this sector is the hidden middle between the producers, the farmers, and all the way to the food manufacturing companies. The companies that help with the technologies, they provide the technologies for food manufacturing and also for protein, alternative protein development. And the angle I want to address here, because we've mentioned about different angles to look at the issue of alternative proteins, is one of business and economic opportunities. They've been mentioned by the speaker earlier. There's a huge potential, and the companies, the food manufacturing technology industry helps with that and wants to seize these opportunities. And they're investing already, investing heavily and investing in Europe. And you wanted to have some examples. I can give some examples of that. And the approach is often one of creating an ecosystem. So they invest in technology development centers or innovation hubs. They tend to work with universities as well, and that enables the universities to also use the equipment that is available for educational or research purposes. And of course, it allows companies that are developing alternative proteins to use this to test pilot in order to be able to eventually scale up and go to industrial production. Of course, it's also an interest for the local authorities, because in a way, you can say that the labs of today are the factories of tomorrow. And in actual fact, the companies are able not just provide the equipment and the technologies to enable that scale up, but some of them are actually able to make the entire factories later. So there is an investment stream that is going in Europe. But if we look at the broader perspective, it's been mentioned earlier, and a lot of these companies are not just active on the European market, they're also active in the US and in Asia, notably. And what we see is that the US remains the strongest destination for biotech capital, often attracting private investments, and notably because there is a simpler and more predictable regulatory environment also when it comes to authorizations. But we also see at the same time that the fastest growing biotech hub is Asia, and with 2/3 of the patents in food biotech that are there, and that's pushed for different reasons there, mostly strong government push and also faster processes to go to market. So in the face of this, what are the levers that Europe can use? They've been mentioned already. That's the curse of being the last speaker, is that you end up parroting a bit what has been said. But maybe I would say, instead of parroting, I would underline what has already been said. So certainly we need an integrated approach and one that has different components. Speeding regulatory pathways, and in particular the authorization processes, because one of the big obstacles to more financing and to investment is the lack of predictability regarding the outcome, but also the timeline. And that's one that is often mentioned, and one that is often mentioned as a good example in the US, where the timeline is very clear from the moment you enter the authorization process. And that's one that is a lot more uncertain here. Of course, more harmonization, we've heard it as well, that there are still different ways of going at alternative proteins in the market. And that will then attract more investment, because we know that there are too many uncertainties at the moment to really unleash the venture and private capital investment. And of course, the educational need is huge. I heard what you said, MEP Borzan, and yes, we are living in times where populists have a stronger podium, and they come up with very simplistic arguments that tend to resonate more easily because they play on fears, they play on the lack of understanding and of knowledge. Exactly, and we've seen it we see it in the US every day. We've seen it with Brexit as well, how easily these kind of arguments can win over people. We need to remain grounded in science, but not too technical. I think it's very important that when we communicate as well, we do that in a way, a bit like was mentioned by the speaker from Danone, that remains exciting from an environmental point of view, exciting from a business point of view, and exciting from a consumer's point of view. And I think we have a lot of good stories to tell, but we need to keep that in mind when comes the time of political discussions. Thank you.
Really liked what you said on the ecosystem approach. And then there's a sentence I'm going to reuse. I like the labs of today are the factories of tomorrow. And I think your point on the biotech capital is a really important one, and actually quite coming at the right moment, with the Biotech Act 1 being under negotiation and the Biotech Act 2 being drafted at the moment. So thanks a lot. We have just a few minutes left for questions. So that means that unfortunately not everyone will get to ask a question, not everyone will get to answer a question, but I think this is also in the spirit of the dialogue today. You have the name of the speakers, you've heard what they had to say, so reach out. It's important to not only keep this to these 2 hours, but to really ensure that this is a lively debate where we agree and disagree. Yeah, I'm gonna probably open from 1 or 2 questions, and then I'm gonna. Yeah, I see. Yeah, I should have said, yeah. We've actually saved by someone being sick, otherwise we might not have made it in time.
Excuse me, can I just jump? Sorry, I'm so sorry, but I'm in a constant communication with my other assistant who is in a committee where I should speak. So she said that this is the last moment that I should start moving towards this other room. So I'm really sorry that I had to leave you these few minutes earlier. And I would really like to thank you all. I think it was a really fruitful discussion. We have different maybe positions, but in the end, I think that we think very much alike. This was really educational for me, and I'm bringing something very useful from this meeting, which will help me in my later legislative work. So thank you very much, and I hope we will see each other because in some other format, because this is, as somebody mentioned, something that is certainly not the last discussion, since this is a really hot topic. Thank you, and hope to see you.
Very good. Thank you so much. So we have the closing words, but we can still come back to the Q&A. So any questions? Can't see the entire, yes.
Very much. Super interesting. And I think we would all enjoy more time to get into the nitty-gritty detail of the discussion. There are some aspects that you talked about integrated approach. Stacey, you talked about finding a common ground. I work for Cargill. I'm Katrijn Otte. And at Cargill, we really find ourselves between the farmers and the food and feed manufacturers using equipment. We do that in Europe. And we add value to the raw materials from the farmers. So we really find ourselves with 2 feet in the bioeconomy discussions. What we really like to do is actually do more of that ecosystem building. We do already produce starches that we produce and sell over the fence, move over the fence to fermentation plants. And we do want to do more of that. We see as a larger company that we can add value as well for that scaling and commercialization of fermentators. Carlo, you actually mentioned as well support for clusters. That's really something that we would really want to see Europe supporting more as well with a coherent policy approach so that more of those bioeconomy clusters could exist for fermentation, but also for other purposes. I just wanted to probe a bit. What do you see and what did you mean by supporter clusters and how can we jointly promote that concept further? Thank you.
So thank you for the question. I think it is a lot about collaborations between the different parties. They need to find each other. They need to build together to that future where we can have that protein production in a very sustainable way. So I think what we need to find out is to look up and find each other in different ways and start collaborating. And it's fantastic if we can have readily access to starches and sugars for production of proteins.
Great. Maybe we already have one positive outcome, a collaboration out of this talk. That'd be great. Any other questions, reflections? Yes, please.
Yes, Giovanni Colombo from DSM Firmenich. I wanted to ask about a topic that was a bit more fashionable a few years ago in Brussels, which was the environmental footprinting of food, of products. And none of you, I think, brought it up. And the question is, would that having like a clear methodology to measure the environmental footprint of food, and the European Commission has developed the PEF, and this has been going on for many years. There have also been specific, I think, pilots for certain food categories, but that now seem have to somehow stop or slow down. And I'm wondering why is that slow down, and would you be in favor of bringing it back? Would it help protein diversification? Would it help to inform consumers? Because of course, on the label, you have nutritional value, but then if you put together nutritional value and sustainability, then you have a more complete information. And there is also a discussion now about pricing carbon in agriculture, potentially. Also, what about that? Would that help also to shift somehow the market in the right direction?
I feel like a lot of you could answer this. So first one to raise their hands can take the question. Yeah, I've seen one there.
I will be quick because I can't speak to the broader sense, but maybe to give the consumer angle, because I checked with the data that we have, and in the survey, consumers did say, a majority of consumers said that they would like access to clear information about the environmental impact of meat products specifically. However, I would also flag, though, that when we ask consumers about what determines their purchasing, sustainability is an important factor, but it always comes down to price. So my response is just to say that yes, there is an interest there, but it's not the main interest for everybody. Also, some consumers said they had no interest in reducing their meat consumption because they didn't think it would really do much. Like the benefit wouldn't really weigh up the cost for them in terms of the environmental impact. So just to put that data out there, I don't know, does anyone else want to follow up with something more concrete in the broader processing?
You heard me, I'm sorry.
Yes, I would like to touch on the question also, because I think that many countries are working on different labels, climate labeling, environmental labeling, etc. It's very, very important that we will work on it in a European scale, because we are open market between all the member states. So it doesn't make sense with a lot of different labels and a lot of different ways of measuring the things which is going into a label. In Denmark, we are working very much on a climate label. The supermarkets and the agriculture and the NGOs, and we have found out how to make a label. But it's very important to add information, because we shouldn't come in a situation where you choose Diet Coke. Sorry about if somebody is producing Diet Coke around the table, and something else which has nothing good for your health, but is very good for the climate, because there's no negative pressure from the Diet Coke on the climate, but there would be on a glass of milk or a glass of oat milk. Thank you very much.
Great. I have a question online first. That's
we need to go.
well, we need to go. So no question online. Thank you very much. And yeah, let's keep the debate alive.